My name is Sarah. I'm from a city in Eastern Europe. Now, that sounds like something from another life, another era. In February 2022, my life split into a clear, painful before and an uncertain, terrifying after. I remember that day well, every second, every sound, every smell. It was very early, it was still deep, pre-dawn darkness, cut only by occasional streetlights. The silence was thick, wintry. I was asleep, immersed in familiar dreams of the future, of spring warmth, of new recipes I wanted to try, of the small joys of a normal, peaceful life. The first explosion wasn't like thunder or any sound I knew. It was a low, visceral rumble that passed through the ground, through the walls of our building, and hit me right in the chest. I woke up not from the sound, but from that physical jolt, from the trembling that ran through my entire body. It was an instinctive, animalistic premonition of disaster. My heart pounded in a frantic rhythm, as if trying to escape my chest. Sensing that the world as I knew it would never be the same, it was breaking apart right now. After the first explosion, more followed, faster, closer. The sound of sirens tore through the city's silence. Lights in the windows of neighboring buildings flashed on, one after another. My phone started buzzing frantically with messages. What is that? Did you hear? War. Panic set in, not organized, but chaotic, primal. People ran from their homes into the street, not knowing where to go, ran to stores, hoping to buy something, anything to get some control in this sudden chaos, called relatives in other cities, in other countries, trying to understand if everyone was alive, if everyone was safe, wrote to friends, and these messages often sounded like goodbyes, words that were never meant to be said in such a context. Mom was nearby, she slept in the next room. I ran to her. She was already sitting up in bed, pale, with wide, staring eyes. She didn't speak, just looked out the window, where the sky was beginning to gray, lit by the flashes of distant explosions. I took her hand. Her palm was cold, but she squeezed mine tightly. She quietly, barely audibly, as if to herself, whispered a prayer I had heard once from my grandma, my mom's mother. A prayer meant to protect from all evil. In that moment, I understood that everything I knew how to do, baking, couldn't save me from this new reality, but it was that very thing that gave me a reason to hold on. My life before this had been simple, filled with small joys and everyday worries. I loved to bake. It was my hobby, my passion, my profession. I worked in a small, cozy bakery in the center of my city. Every morning, I would get there before dawn to knead the dough, put the first loaves in the oven. The smell of fresh bread, sweet rolls, hot pastries, that was my world, a world of warmth, comfort, and predictability. I knew that with the right ingredients, patience, and love, something good would always turn out. I had been baking since childhood. Mom taught me, her hands, covered in flour, her advice, her smile when we took rosy pastries out of the oven, these memories were the warmest. I had a notebook with her recipes, written in a neat hand. Every page of that notebook smelled of vanilla, cinnamon, and home. On that terrible February night, I understood that everything I knew how to do, all my skill, all my love for baking, couldn't save me from rockets, from bullets, from death. It was a brutal realization, but it was in this moment of complete helplessness, that very skill of mine, baking, creating something warm and real from simple things, gave me a strange, unexpected reason to hold on, a reason to survive, so that maybe someday I could smell the rising dough again. The next few days were hell, constant shelling, cold basements where we hid for hours, listening to the sounds of war above, fear for every loved one, for every acquaintance who remained in the city, ruined streets, shattered windows, broken lives. My beloved city was turning into ruins. We made the decision to evacuate. It wasn't easy, to leave everything behind, the home we had built, the things we had collected over years. The memories that lived within the apartment walls, but staying was too dangerous, every day could be our last. Evacuation. It was a long, exhausting, and painful journey into the unknown. First, attempts to leave my city, overflowing train stations, thousands of people with suitcases, frightened children, pets, chaos, nerves, tears. We spent many hours on a cold platform, hoping to get on any train heading west. Finally, we were lucky enough to get a spot. The carriages were packed, people sat in the aisles, on the stairs, stood for hours, stuffiness mixed with fear and exhaustion. Children cried, adults tried to stay composed, but their faces held frozen terror and unspoken sorrow. We traveled slowly, stopping at every turn, letting military trains pass, hiding from shelling. Every click of the wheels echoed with pain in my heart. Our first stop was in a transit city further west. It welcomed us, like thousands of other refugees, with warmth and compassion. The train station turned into a huge shelter, volunteers, food, a place to rest. But this city was only a temporary refuge. The war continued, and the fear caught up with us even here. The decision to go further, across the border, to Europe, seemed like the only way out. The journey to the border was another trial. Again, overcrowded trains, hours of waiting at crossings, cold, fatigue, uncertainty. At the border, queues, hundreds of people crossing the line between war and, what? A new life? A safer one? No one knew. There was only hope and fear of the unknown. We traveled through Europe, Poland, Germany, night train stations of big cities where we waited for the next trains. We slept on benches, on the floor, wrapped in blankets provided by volunteers. We saw thousands like us, with suitcases, with empty eyes, with the history of war written on their faces. We shared food, water, silence, because words were unnecessary. Everyone understood each other without them. It was a path full of tears, tears of parting with home, tears of fear, tears of exhaustion, dirty carriages we traveled in for days, unfamiliar faces of fellow travelers who for a few hours or days became closer than family, because they shared this journey with you. In this chaos of movement, in this constant feeling of loss, I lost almost everything. My home, it remained in my city, under shelling. My job, the bakery where I worked, was destroyed. My usual life, it no longer existed. I almost lost hope. It flickered like a small flame in the wind, ready to go out at any moment. But in my small, miraculously saved suitcase, or rather, in the pocket of the jacket that lay on top of my things, remained an old, folded-up postcard, yellowed with age. It was the recipe for Mom's poppy seed rolls, written in her hand back in the 90s. The recipe I asked her to write down for me when I was just starting to learn how to bake. This postcard was the only thing that physically remained of my home, of my peaceful past. It smelled of old paper and distant, happy memories. It was my anchor in this crazy, unpredictable sea of trouble. Chicago greeted me with cold, not just the physical cold of late autumn. We arrived much later than February. The journey was long, but also the coldness of an unfamiliar city, an unfamiliar country. I arrived with one small suitcase containing a few sets of clothes, 2 scarves that once belonged to Mom, and that recipe that lay like a charm in my jacket pocket. For the first weeks, and then months, I lived in a refugee shelter. It was a large space, repurposed for temporary housing, many people with different stories, different traumas, but with one shared experience, the experience of war and loss. We shared rooms, bathrooms, kitchens. We shared the little we had, tea, modest food, stories, if someone dared to speak, but more often, silence, a silence that was also understood. We were broken dreams, gathered in one place. Adjusting was difficult. My English was very basic, at the level of high school lessons, understanding people, filling out documents, looking for work, All of it was a huge challenge. I felt mute, invisible, as if I didn't exist in this new world. I took any job I could get. I cleaned in small cafes after they closed, washed floors, took out trash. I mopped floors in a supermarket early in the morning, before it even opened. I looked after the child of an Italian grandma who had immigrated many years ago and, hearing my name Sarah, stubbornly called me Sally. "Oh, Sally, cara mia," she'd say with her accent, and although it was a little annoying, I didn't correct her. She was kind and paid a little money, barely enough for the essentials. I felt like a small cog in a huge, unfamiliar machine. I had lost my name. I became just a refugee, or Sally, my profession. Who was I without my bakery, my place in the world? I was a nobody with no name. Loneliness weighed heavily, even among other people. I missed home. I missed Mom. I missed the smell of my city after the rain. I missed my bakery, the warmth of the oven. But I was stubborn. Perhaps this stubbornness is also a part of our spirit, not to give up, to hold on, to find a way out even in the darkest times. And I loved to bake. This love wasn't just a hobby, it was my roots, my identity. It was like sourdough, not immediately visible, not spectacular, but if nurtured correctly, given warmth and time, it would definitely grow, turning into something alive and valuable, even in this cold, foreign country. I knew I couldn't just forget about it. It was a part of me, the part that the war couldn't take away. One evening, when the day was particularly difficult and exhausting, when I returned from cleaning feeling completely empty, I was overcome by an unbearable longing for home, for that feeling of warmth and comfort that the smell of fresh baking gives. I sat on my bed in the shelter, looking at the wall, and tears flowed freely, uncontrollably. And suddenly, I remembered Mom's recipe. I had it, physically. It was something tangible, something real in this world of uncertainty. I got up. I didn't know where I would get the ingredients, but I felt a sharp, physical need to knead dough. My roommate in the shelter was Mrs. Anya, a woman who had also experienced occupation and evacuation from her city in Eastern Europe. She was quiet, but kindness shone in her eyes. I turned to her, hesitating. "Mrs. Anya, I'm sorry to bother you, but by any chance do you have a little flour? And some yeast?" She looked at me with understanding. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She just got up, opened her small bag, and pulled out a nearly full bag of flour. "Here, take it, dear, and there's sugar, and I think there was some yeast." She gave me everything she had. It was an act of pure, selfless kindness between two strangers united by common misfortune. With these simple ingredients in my hands, I felt a surge of strength. It was like coming back to myself. I found a small corner in the shared kitchen at the shelter, pulled out my recipe, the yellowed postcard with Mom's handwriting, mixed the ingredients, kneaded the dough. My hands remembered. They remembered the right consistency, the right pressure, the right movements. It was like meditation. I focused only on the dough, on the feelings under my fingers. I kneaded it, pouring into it all my longing, all my pain, all my unspent love for home. That was all I had in that moment: memories, patience, skill. I decided to try making sourdough from scratch. It required time and care. Like hope, I mixed flour and water, put it in a warm place. Day after day, I fed it, watched as the first bubbles appeared, a sign of life. It was symbolic, my own little starter of life in a foreign country. I baked bread, simple ingredients, simple dough, but when I took it out of the small oven in the shared kitchen of the shelter, when I smelled that aroma, I couldn't stop crying. They flowed freely, endlessly. It was the smell of home, not an abstract home, but my specific home in my city, the smell of Mom's kitchen, the smell of childhood, the smell of safety and peace. It was the smell of hope, hope that I could create something good even here, hope that life goes on. This simple loaf of bread, baked in a foreign country, became a symbol for me, a symbol of survival, resilience, unbreakable spirit. I shared the bread with Mrs. Anya and the other residents of the shelter. We ate it in silence, tasting home in every piece. It was a moment of unity, a moment of quiet comfort. After that first loaf of bread, I started baking more, not just bread, but the same poppy seed rolls from Mom's recipe on the postcard. It was for my soul, for myself, to feel connected to home. Mrs. Anya tried my rolls and was amazed. "Sarah, it's just like home." She took a few rolls and shared them with her friend, who also lived nearby. This friend, Mrs. Irene, worked as a secretary at a large law firm, where a lawyer actively helped Ukrainian refugees. Mrs. Irene brought the rolls to the office. The lawyer, Mr. Robert, tried them and was impressed. He was American but had Polish roots and loved Slavic pastries. "This is incredible. Where did this come from?" he asked Mrs. Irene. She told him about me, about the refugee from my city who lived in a shelter and baked such wonders. Mr. Robert contacted me through Mrs. Irene. He offered me a small order to bake a few loaves of bread and a batch of rolls for an event they were organizing to help Ukraine. I agreed, although I was very nervous. The first commercial order was successful. People at the event were delighted with the taste of real Eastern European bread and pastries. The smell of my poppy seed rolls brought tears to the eyes of many Ukrainians who were also at the event, so strongly did it remind them of home. Among the guests was the owner of a small but popular cafe in downtown Chicago, Mr. Michael. He approached me after the event. "Your bread, it's something special. I've never tasted anything like it," he said. "Do you bake for sale? I'd like to offer you the chance to bake for my cafe." I was stunned. This was the first real opportunity to do what I loved in this country. I agreed. It was an incredibly difficult period. I continued to work my low-paying jobs during the day to have money for living expenses and to rent a small, professional oven and mixer. Mr. Robert helped find affordable equipment and with the first documents, and at night, I baked for Mr. Michael's cafe. I worked 18 to 20 hours a day. My hands were constantly covered in flour, and I had dark circles under my eyes from lack of sleep. I rented a small part of a kitchen in a commercial space to meet sanitary standards. It was empty there at night, and I could work. The smell of fresh baking filled the space, becoming my only companion during those long hours. Early in the morning, when the city was still asleep, I would deliver fresh bread and pastries to Mr. Michael's cafe. Then I'd go to my day job. The fatigue was immense, but I felt a strange surge of energy. I was doing what I loved. I was creating something real. I saw the result of my labor, and that result brought joy to other people. Word of my baking gradually spread throughout Chicago. Mr. Michael's cafe gained many new customers who came specifically for that Ukrainian bread and those amazing rolls. People started placing individual orders, for holidays, for family events. I saved money. Every dollar earned was a step towards my dream, a dream of my own place, a place where I could bake freely, where the smell of my bread would be the smell of my home, my Ukraine. About a year after I arrived in Chicago, I realized it was time to take a risk. I had saved enough to make a down payment for a small space and buy the necessary equipment. It was scary to quit my stable, though exhausting, jobs, to invest all my money in an idea that might not work, but the desire was stronger than the fear. Again, kind people helped. Mr. Robert advised me on legal matters, filing documents for the business. It was a complex process, lots of paperwork, many unfamiliar terms, but he patiently explained everything and helped. Mrs. Irene and other Ukrainians I met helped with advice, provided moral support. I found a small, cozy space in a neighborhood where many Ukrainians lived, but which was also frequented by Americans. It needed renovations, but I saw its potential, a place where I could create an atmosphere of home. The most important step was choosing a name for the bakery. I thought for a long time. I wanted the name to be Ukrainian, for it to mean something. And then I remembered the word that had become a symbol of everything that was happening, the word that became a marker of friend or foe in the first days of the war. I decided to name the bakery Palianitsia. This name was more than just a word, it was a symbol of resilience, identity, belonging. Palianitsia is our bread, but it's also a word that enemies cannot pronounce due to the specifics of its pronunciation. It's our password, our spirit, our home. The bakery's opening was modest. There were no grand ceremonies. Friends, acquaintances, Ukrainians from the diaspora, Americans who had already tasted my baking came. I baked a lot of bread, rolls, and pastries. The smell of fresh baking filled the space, and it was the sweetest aroma in my life. People came in and asked, "What does that name mean?" Palianitsia? And I answered everyone who asked. I told them the story of this word, the story of our war, the story of my journey. It's a word that enemies cannot pronounce. It's our password, our spirit. It's a reminder of our home, which we love and for which we are fighting. And these words, spoken in my small bakery in Chicago, resonated in people's hearts. Ukrainians understood immediately, and tears appeared in their eyes. Americans listened with respect and curiosity, learning more about Ukraine not from the news, but firsthand, through taste and story. My bakery, Palianitsia, quickly became something more than just a place that sold bread. It became a shelter, an island of warmth and home in the middle of a big, noisy American city. Ukrainian refugees came here. They drank tea at small tables, talked in their native language, shared news from home, told their stories of evacuation, of loss. For many, it was the only place where they could feel free, where they were understood, where they didn't have to explain why there was sadness in their eyes and fatigue in their voices. I listened to them, shared my own story, offered fresh bread, which for many was the taste of their abandoned home. It was a place of mutual support, empathy, and hope. Elderly Ukrainians from the diaspora, who had immigrated many years ago, came here. They longed for a Ukraine that, perhaps, no longer existed, or had changed beyond recognition. They found in my bakery a piece of their youth, the taste of their grandma's pastries, the smell of bread they remembered from childhood. They told me their stories of emigration, shared wisdom, or simply sat, enjoying the atmosphere and speaking Ukrainian. Americans came here too, just residents of the neighborhood, tourists, people who had heard about Palianitsia from friends or in the news. They came to try cabbage pierogi, which became a bestseller, poppy seed rolls, or cheese pastries. They were open to new tastes, to new stories. They asked about the name, about Ukraine, about the war, and I told them. I told the story of a woman who lost almost everything, her home, her job, her familiar life, her sense of safety, almost her hope, but who kept the most important things, her roots, her identity, her talent, a woman who, with a small suitcase and an old recipe in her pocket, was able to build a new life in a foreign country. Every story, every conversation, every smiling customer gave me strength. I saw that my bakery was not just a business, it was a bridge between Ukraine and America, between the past and the future, between pain and hope. It was a place where the taste of bread tells a story. Now I bake more than just bread. The assortment at Palianitsia has expanded, but each item has its own story, its own connection to tradition, to memory. I bake pampuki, fluffy, fragrant rolls, often served with garlic sauce. For me, it's the taste of a Ukrainian meal, the taste of a holiday, the taste of home comfort. When I take them out of the oven, I remember how Mom used to bake them with borscht, how the whole family would gather around the table. I bake poppy seed rolls, small, crispy, sweet. It's the taste of childhood, the taste of Grandma's treats. Grandma always baked them for holidays, and that aroma would fill the whole house. I bake Grandma's prяники, gingerbread/spice cookies, soft, fragrant, with different patterns. Each cookie is a small work of art, and each carries the warmth of Grandma's hands, her care, her love. I bake cherry pastries, pyrashki, sweet, with a hint of tartness, from dough that melts in your mouth. It's the taste of summer, the taste of Grandma's garden, where there was a big cherry tree. Every time I knead the dough for these goods, when I smell the familiar aromas, my thoughts travel back home, to my peaceful city, to my family, to my past life. It's not always painless, sometimes these memories bring tears, but they are good tears, tears of gratitude for what was, and tears of hope that someday, perhaps, it might return, at least in memories. I realized that my baking is not just food, it's a connection to the past, a connection to Ukraine, a connection between people. Anyone who tastes my goods receives not just a flavor, but a piece of my story, a piece of the Ukrainian soul. I learned to experiment, to add something new to traditional recipes, to adapt them to American tastes, but always preserving the base, the soul. The path from my city to my own bakery in Chicago was incredibly difficult. It was a path through pain, loss, fear, despair. War left its scars on me, invisible, deep scars on my heart and soul. I will never forget the sounds of explosions, the cold of basements, the faces of frightened people on trains. I will never forget the feeling of complete helplessness when you lose everything dear to you. But the war also forged in me a strength of spirit that I never even suspected I had. It taught me resilience, stubbornness, the ability to fight for my place under the sun, even when that sun shines in a foreign country. It taught me to value simple things, a peaceful sky overhead, the ability to wake up in the morning without fear, the warmth of human connection, a stranger's smile. My bakery Palianitsia is not just the result of my work, it is a symbol of my resilience, it is the physical embodiment of my hope. Every loaf of bread I bake is a small victory over pain, over fear, over despair. It is proof that even after the most terrible storm, life goes on. I have changed. I am no longer the naive girl from my city who believed in a predictable future. I have become stronger, wiser, more grateful for every day I live. I have learned to live with my scars, not hiding from them, but accepting them as part of my story. I have seen many other Ukrainians who have also experienced similar things. Each of them carries their own story, their own scars, and I am proud that my bakery has become a place where these stories can be told, where support can be found, where you can feel part of a community. Now I stand in my bakery, Palianitsia. Morning, the first rays of sun break through the window, illuminating the golden crust of freshly baked bread on the shelves. The air is filled with an incredible aroma, the aroma of bread, sweet rolls, cinnamon, poppy seeds. This is my world, a world I built with my own hands, with a small suitcase, 2 scarves, and an old recipe. My name is Sarah, and the scent of my bread is the scent of freedom, not just freedom from war, from shelling, from fear. It is the freedom to be myself, to do what I love, to build my life anew. It is the freedom to tell my story, to be heard, to be understood. It smells of pain, the pain of loss, the pain of separation, the pain of the war that is still ongoing in my country. This pain will always be a part of me, like scars. It smells of resilience, the strength of spirit that did not break under the blows of fate, the stubbornness that kept me going, even when I had no strength left. It smells of love, love for my country, for its traditions, for the people who helped me along the way, for every customer who walks through the door of Palianitsia. And love for the craft itself, for the magic of turning simple ingredients into something amazing. And, strangely enough, it smells of happiness, the quiet, conscious happiness of a person who has found her place in the world, who has created something valuable out of nothing, the happiness of being able to give people joy, the taste of home, a piece of hope. Every loaf of bread I bake is not just food for the body, it is food for the soul. It carries the story of my life, the story of my people, the story of the fight for freedom. Palianitsia is not just a bakery in Chicago, it is a piece of Ukraine, it is my home, which I recreated thousands of miles away from my true home. It is a place where the scent of bread is the strongest reminder of who I am, where I am from, and what I have overcome. I look at the shelves, filled with fresh baking, and feel a deep satisfaction. My journey was incredibly difficult, but it brought me here, to this aroma, to this place, to this feeling of freedom. The scent of my bread, it is the scent of home, the scent of peace, the scent of freedom, and it is sweeter than any exquisite perfume in the world.